Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into the trade deadline preview of the Breakaway Bandits podcast on the Sports Insanity Network. I am Mike Rifkin. Like I said, trade deadline preview. Trade deadline is this Friday, March 9th, I believe is the date. Uh, we'll cover the two trades that have occurred prior to the deadline. We'll talk about some players on the block, teams that are going to buy and sell, and then there's a couple of news and notes that I will hit on at the end. Like I said, two trades have already occurred. One real major, the other one could be a big factor as well. We start with the Western Conference team. The Dallas Stars acquired Flames defenseman Chris Tanev as part of a three-team deal. The Flames get prospect Artem Grushnikov, a 2024 second-round pick, and a 2026 third-round pick. That is a conditional pick if the Dallas Stars get to the Stanley Cup Finals. And the New Jersey Devils get a 2026 fourth-round pick. The Devils and Flames are each eating half of the salary remaining on Tanev's deal. That's why the Devils are involved here. So for Dallas, what are they getting in Chris Tanev? A defensive defenseman who plays the right side, which is very important in today's game. That right shot defenseman. But Tanev slots into the top four in Dallas, blocks a ton of shots, can help them on the penalty kill. This is a Dallas Star team that I don't want to toot my own horn, but they were my pick coming out of the Western Conference this year, and I think there's a really good chance of that. But if you look at the Central Division, the top three teams, Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg, those three teams, any one of them can actually get to the Stanley Cup final. And I'll throw Vegas in there as well in the Western Conference. Vancouver, maybe. Need to see a little bit more. We'll talk about Vancouver in a little bit because they made a massive deal with one of their own earlier, late last week. But Calgary, listen, Calgary said this. Calgary essentially said we are going to trade anybody who is in an impending UFA. Chris Tanev is in an impending UFA. Noah Hannafin's likely to get traded this week at some point. We'll get into the Jacob Markstrom thing in a couple of minutes here, but we knew Chris Tanev. He was the top guy on a lot of people's boards. Dallas winds up acquiring him. So it's a great deal for Dallas. Calgary gets a draft pick and a prospect in Grushnikov, who everything I've heard, I don't know, this is everything secondhand. He's like Chris Tanev. He's a physical defenseman, blocks shots. He's not an offensive guy. So Calgary's going to have to hit on these picks. But I also don't know the direction of the Calgary Flames because they are in the mix here in the Western Conference. But while at the same time, they're just trading a lot of pieces that are important to them. Tanev's a guy. Hannafin is a really good player. But they're also caught in the middle because of the Nazem Kadri contract, the Jonathan Huberdeau contract. It's a tough spot for Craig Conroy and Ryan Huska, two guys who are in their first years respectively as coach and GM, that they're putting themselves in a tough spot that was put on them by the prior regime. And let's be honest, the prior regime kind of got left in the dust too after the whole Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk situations. So Calgary's a team to watch here for different reasons. But let's also get into the Jacob Markstrom stuff because this is from Eric Francis of Sportsnet. Jacob Markstrom said this was late last week. I think this was Friday. The tweet says, Eric Francis, fascinating shot sent by Jacob Markstrom when I asked if he had parked all trade talk and was resigned to being here past March 8th. And I quote, everyone in here, I really respect everything that's been going on and not going on. Now, everyone in this room has handled everything. I think it's been really good. And then the whole situation and everything, am I happy about that? No, I'm not. I think it could have been handled a lot different from up top. Close quote. What he is referring to is Calgary went to Jacob Markstrom and asked him if he was willing to waive his no trade clause. Markstrom said yes. And then talks between the Flames and the New Jersey Devils broke off. The Flames then countered and said, we're going to hold Markstrom for the rest of the year. And then that's the response you get from Jacob Markstrom. And I can't blame Jacob Markstrom because you signed there to win. You signed in Calgary to win. They asked you if you are willing to waive your no trade. He says yes. And then, they kind of pulled the rug out from under him. And look, I'm not going to rule the player here. I don't think there's a player issue. I think communication was bad on both on the Flames side. Because you got to realize when you move a player, you're not just trading a player. That player has a family. That player, has other things going on. So the way the Flames handled this, don't love it. Markstrom, I thought, was solid the other night when they beat the Pittsburgh Penguins. But, psychologically, like, you're toying with the guy. So I wonder if this opens things back up between now and Friday for Markstrom. But I don't see a lot of contenders needing goaltending. I think the biggest one would have been the Devils, but they have not played really well recently. And so I don't know if you want to go for it. The only other team I could think of that could use a goaltender would be the LA Kings. And that's just because I don't trust Cam Talbot and I don't trust David Riddick. I mean, could Detroit go out and get Markstrom? I mean, that I put that out on Twitter. I got crucified basically for it. Because everyone knows Alex Lyon's been tremendous. But Calgary's in a tough spot. We know Hannafin's going to go. We know Tanev's going to go. Markstrom, I'm back on the fence of Jacob Markstrom. But if he's not moved here, I think you have to move him in the summertime. Because I don't think you could go into next year with him as your starting goaltender. Not because he's a bad goaltender, but because of the situation the Calgary Flames have put him in. All right. The other deal that occurred late last week involves the Toronto Maple Leafs. They acquired Ilya Lyubushkin from the Anaheim Ducks and prospect Kirill Sleps from the Carolina Hurricanes. The Ducks get a 2025 third-round pick, while Carolina gets a 2024 sixth. Same thing as Calgary and New Jersey. The Ducks and the Hurricanes will retain half of Lyubushkin's salary. Lyubushkin's second stint in Toronto. I like Tanev, physical defenseman, block shots. He left the game Saturday after taking a hit from Matt Rempe of the New York Rangers. I still think the Leafs can use another defenseman. Here's my thing on the Leafs. The Leafs can do anything they want here in the regular season. Austin Matthews could score 70 goals. Marner can do his thing. Tavares, Nylander, they could all do their thing. I'm not judging the Toronto. I've decided the Toronto Maple Leafs will not be judged on what they do from October to April, or when the regular season ends. The Toronto Maple Leafs are going to be judged on what they do in the playoffs. So Austin Matthews can score 70 goals and we can all celebrate it. But if they lose in the first round again, I don't care. This is going to be my subtle shot at Moser on this podcast. The Toronto Maple Leafs have become the Buffalo Bills of the National Hockey League. I don't care about the regular season. Go out and get to the Eastern Conference Finals if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs. Will they? I don't know. They're going to have to go through Boston and Florida. And right now, I don't think they beat Florida. Florida's just way too good right now. Boston's not playing great, so they're beatable. So, but the Ducks, you know what the Ducks are doing? I'm very confused on the Ducks at the moment. I had a little bit of a higher expectation for them this year. They have not lived up to it, but they're in that position. Carolina being the team that eats a little bit of money here, that doesn't necessarily surprise me. Carolina, they find Carolina's going to do something. I don't know if it's a major move, but Carolina's going to do something. Uh, all right. So those are the deals that have taken place. Here's I'm using the TSN big board here. So I'm going to read off a name. I'll probably tell you where the or logical landing spots or things that we've heard. Calgary is the number one. Calgary. Noah Hannafin's number one player on the TSN trade bait board. We've heard Boston. We've heard Florida. We've heard Tampa. We've heard Tampa's the preferred destination. The problem with that for Tampa Bay, they don't have trade assets. They don't have a first round pick till 26. They gave up a lot of capital to get Tanner Jeannot. So they would have to get very creative in here if they're going to have to acquire Hannafin. And by the way, they're going to have the money because Mikhail Sergachev is on LTIR. Florida. I also think of this: if you want to be a long-term buyer and a sign and trade candidate, how about a team like Arizona? Like I know they're not going to make the playoffs, but if I'm them, Arizona, and I got a plethora of picks, and I've got whatever's going on, I might consider this if I'm Arizona. A team like Chicago, Noah Hannafin, he may not meet your timeline right away, but he's 26. We're not talking about a guy who's 31, 32. I know they paid a lot of money for Seth Jones, but Noah Hannafin, if I can make that work, that could be something. Markstrom, we already talked about. I think he's there for the rest of the year. I'd be very intrigued if they do move him. I just don't know what suitors are coming in. Tana's already been moved. All right, Jake Gensel, Pittsburgh Penguins. He's out right now with an injury. He's been skiing with the team. The Penguins have to make this deal. The Penguins have to move him because the Penguins are in the same spot now as the Washington Capitals, where they have a legendary player, Crosby Ovechkin. Pittsburgh, I know you're going to say, well, Malkin and Letang too, but I'll get there in a second. But you made promises to these two guys that you're going to be a Stanley Cup contender throughout the rest of these guys' career, the rest of their careers. The problem with Pittsburgh is they've gotten old. Crosby is 35, 36. He's having a Hart Trophy caliber year. But outside of that, Malkin hasn't played great. Jeff Carter is slowed down. Rickard Rakell hasn't had a great year. Brian Rust has had some injuries. Like this team, and they got nothing coming through the pipeline because they don't have their draft picks get moved to help this team get better. And they're just not there. They're not there. And you're going to get a lot for Jake Gensel. He's probably he is the best goal scorer on the market. But for me right now, after what they've lost 3 in a row, they got shut out in Seattle. They lost a heartbreaker in Calgary. I mean, they were up 3-1 in the third period, and they lost the game 4-3 with 50 seconds left. Like that can't happen. And listen, I don't fault Kyle Dubas for going for it with the Carlson deal. I think he was put in a very tough position, but something's got to change in Pittsburgh, and I would sell Jake Gensel. I'm going to get probably get a first round pick, maybe a second round pick as well, plus a prospect. Someone might pay that price. So I think Pittsburgh, logical landing spot. I'll give you one. I threw this to Dan Rosen of NHL.com for his uh, over the boards mailbag that he does every Wednesday about Nashville and Nashville being a buyer here because they've won 8 in a row and they have a ton of picks, they have a ton of cap space. And Dan Rosen said they should go after Jake Gensel. I'm like, the more I thought about it, I go, you know what? Makes a ton of sense. So Nashville, Edmonton makes some sense. They've been looking for a top 6 winger again. I don't know why, but they are. But I think there are teams out there who are going to take the look at Gensel. I think Pittsburgh's got to move him between now and Friday. Vancouver, I know, has shown some interest as well. If I'm Kyle Dubas, but I listen, I'll listen on Gensel. I'll listen. I have to listen on Riley Smith. The intriguing name for me is Tristan Jarry, and I know there's been some people who've speculated on that. That low key could be very interesting if I'm Pittsburgh. But Gensel's gone. In my opinion, Gensel's gone. Adam Henrique of the Ducks. I've heard the rumors of the New York Rangers. I'm not there. I have no interest in Henrique and Frank Vatrano. That's not the deal for me for the Rangers. There's someone else on this board that intrigues me more. I think Boston Bruins make a ton of sense for Adam Henrique. They miss Bergeron and Krejci. They've kind of hit a little bit of a bump here over the last little while. Maybe Henrique going on a third line there. And maybe they spark something on a wing as well. But Boston, I think, is a good spot. Maybe Carolina, although I really like Carolina's forwards. But they do need a guy who could help them put the puck in the net. I'm not going to do Edmonton's first round pick. Sean Walker, Scott Lawton, and Philly. Lawton's got one more year left. I've heard some rumblings. Rangers, again, looking at a checking line center. I think another team that, again, Boston would be interesting. I think another team that we kind of sit on the fence about, and not just Nashville, because I think Nashville's in an interesting position. Lawton's got one more year left on his deal. So maybe a team, again, maybe not in the playoff mix this year. You bring him in for next year as well to help you out. That could be something as well. Bring in a little bit of a veteran experience. So maybe a team like Chicago, Arizona, the Columbus Blue Jackets. That can make some sense. Anaheim. If Anaheim gives up Henrique, they can bring in Lawton if they wanted to. Anaheim and Philly have already made a deal this year. The Jamie Drysdale for Cutter Gauthier deal. Sean Walker, we've heard Philly has had extension talks with him, and if they don't come to anything, he's probably out. Dallas, Toronto are the two, we've heard on the back end. Edmonton as well. Listen, if you're a defenseman, you're going to get moved. You're going to get a pretty good price for a defenseman. Defensemen get moved here at the trade deadline pretty well. Then you got Vladimir Tarasenko of the Ottawa Senators. This is just for the Ranger fan listening. The Rangers can't make this move without Ottawa retaining. Ottawa can't retain here. When I say retain, I mean money. So that would eat most of the that would eat all the Ranger cap space. So I find that unlikely. The Islanders make sense. If they're going to buy, I'm not sure what Lou's plan is, even after winning 3 in a row. Carolina, I think, makes a ton of sense. I thought that Carolina made sense during the offseason, too. That's just a whole nother conversation. And then, again, a team that doesn't land Gensel, Edmonton, Nashville, maybe Vancouver. That would be an interesting one. Pavel Buchnevich of the Blues, again, another guy with one more year left, so kind of confused by that. Uh, Again, maybe the Bruins could do it. Maybe the Rangers bring him back, but again, that's a big cap hit. I'll tell you what. I think teams who may think they're on the precipice may get a Buchnevich, or St. Louis holds off and waits until the summertime if they're going to do it. Jake Allen. I don't know if there's a team out there that just loves Jake Allen enough to do it. I mean, he could be a backup somewhere. I just don't like if Mark. Listen, if I'm trading for a goalie, and this is not knocking Jake Allen, like I'm gonna try to see if I can pull Markstrom, or I'm gonna call Minnesota to see if they're gonna change their mind on Marc-Andre Fleury. Like I no offense to Jake Allen, his numbers have not been great this year. Albeit Montreal's not a great team, but excuse me. Jacob Chikrin in Ottawa. I said it on the last episode when I did the senator statement address. I don't think I would move Chikrin. I might even see if I can move Thomas Chabot and sign Chikrin to a long-term deal. They gave up a lot of assets for Chikrin. There was a reason for it. They obviously believe in him. Obviously, also, though, that was a prior regime with Pierre Dorian. Now Steve Stais is in charge. Ottawa, to me, is going to have a fascinating offseason. Trade deadline, Tarasenko's probably going to, but Ottawa's going to have to make some decisions here. Who's the coach? Do I trade a core player? What can I bring in to potentially help a team that I think is ultra talented? How do I get them over this hump? That's going to be a major question in Ottawa. I don't think Jacques Martin's the coach. He might stay on as in an assistant or an advisory role, but I don't think he's the head coach next year. I said it on the last episode. I think it's Claude Julien. That's the guy I would go with, but I don't make those decisions. That'll be now up to Steve Stais. Not talking first rounders. Dallas's first rounders up there. Jordan Eberle. Okay, this is the guy for me. This is the guy for the New York Rangers. Jordan, if there is a way the New York Rangers can make a deal with the Seattle Kraken, Jordan Eberle, and potentially Yanni Gourde, I'm in. I am there. Jordan Eberle could play with Kreider and Zibanejad. Yanni Gourde could center a third line. I'm in. I am in. I would give up my 2024 first. I would give them Zach Jones if that was an ask. Really, the only prospect I find untouchable is Brennan Hoffman. So whatever else you want, maybe even Gabe Perreault, who's having a really good year at BC. But man, if I can get Eberle and Yanni Gourde, if I'm the Rangers, that's the deal. Like that's I'm all in on that one. I love Jordan Eberle. I think he's been a phenomenal player for a long time. He was great in Edmonton. He was great for the Islanders. He's been really good in Seattle. He's a very talented guy. Then we got Jack Roslovic of Columbus. Columbus, to me, They fired Yarmo Kekalainen. More on that after we go through some of these other names. Roslovic's a guy who just he hasn't found it yet, but the talent's there. So I wonder if a team, Philly, Philly's going through this rebuild despite them playing really well. Do they take a chance and say, you know what, this kid's got something? Maybe we can figure it out. Arizona can maybe figure it out. The Blackhawks again. Like, I don't think this is just a guy who has to go to a contender. This is a guy who's young enough to still find it. Frank Vitrano. Again, I don't know what Anaheim's doing. He's got another year left, but digress. I know Ranger fans want him back. I'm not there on him and Henrique. He's had a good year, but he's been a power play guy most of the year for them. Good player, got some speed. Maybe Carolina. Maybe that's the Carolina trigger move. I, maybe Vegas. I'll throw Vegas in on Gensel too. I mean, especially with the Mark Stone injury. But yeah, Vetrano. Then you got Nick Sealer in Philly. Same thing as Walker, but I think Sealer more of a defensive defenseman. I've heard Toronto. I've heard maybe Dallas. That there's a market for defensemen. There just is here. If the Devils were to buy, maybe the Devils, but I don't think they're in a buy position at the moment. So that's where I would go. Anthony Duclair of the Sharks, another guy who has played for a lot of teams and has a lot of upside, a lot of speed, great wrist shot. Went to a Sharks team that everyone knows is going through this rebuild. And so he showcased himself. He's played pretty well. Maybe Tampa Bay. Maybe he's a guy who could spark Tampa Bay in the bottom six a little bit. I don't think the price should be that high. So maybe Tampa does that. That maybe that's an influx of speed for Tampa Bay. Alex Wenberg of Seattle, Boston, maybe the Rangers. I prefer the Yanni Gord move. Wenberg's a good player, undervalued, underrated, but a good player. Nick Dowd in Washington, bottom six player, brings a little bit of feistiness into the game. I kind of like that in Edmonton. I think Edmonton can use a little bit more feistiness. I know they brought in Corey Perry, but Nick Dowd could be a guy who helps them out too. Matt Dumba, Arizona. This is the guy. If Sean Walker's not there for Dallas, Dumba would be the guy. Dumba can help out a second power play unit. He's played in big playoff games before with Minnesota. So I think Dumba's a guy very familiar with the Central Division. That would be the guy for me for Dallas. If they can wind up with Dumba and Tanev, that's a winning deadline. And if they wind up getting another top 9 player, maybe Jason Zucker in Arizona, and they find a way to make that work, that could be very intriguing if I'm the Dallas Stars. Mikael Granlund in San Jose. San Jose's got players here. Duclair, I think, is the best one. They're going to move. Granlund's an interesting guy. Maybe Colorado, but I don't view Granlund as a number 2 center. I don't know where he would go, where he would fit best. Just a couple of other names before I get into the news and notes. Anthony Mantha in Washington having a breakout year. I would try to stay away because he just hasn't proven it in the playoffs. And to me, he caught lightning in a bottle his walk year. Now, again, if he wants to audition for another team, Arizona, and it costs them like a third round pick, go for it. Go for it if you're in Arizona. It's not a bad price to see if this guy could be a part of your future. There's a I think everyone so worries themselves with the contenders here at the deadline, where teams who might be on the preface of something can also make moves that could help them in the long term, even though they're buying it from a sell position. Um, Nick Robertson of the Leafs. This guy's an interesting one to me, and this is just because if the Leafs are going to do something big, he's going to have to be included. If the Leafs do something big and he's included, ton of upside, young player. So I think we're in a position to where if a change of scenery is best for him, he can flourish. I wonder if Dallas and the Leafs do something here, and Nick Robertson winds up playing with his brother Jason, who's become a heck of a player himself. I'm not saying that it would be Nick Robertson for a first round pick or Tyler Seguin, but hey, Toronto, you're gonna dump the kid. Hey, here's third round pick, conditional second. What do you do? Would you do it? I'm not sure, but it's something you could look for. Jason Zucker brought up before, maybe Dallas. Riley Smith back to Vegas would make so much sense, and the league would be so angry, and I'm so here for it. Tyler Johnson at Chicago, he'll get moved. Maybe a team like maybe Tampa Bay brings him back, but the injury history would scare me. And then UC Stars. I don't think Nashville's going to do this after winning 8 in a row. After winning the 8 in a row, and they're in the one of the wild card spots right now, and they're playing great hockey. So I don't think Nashville makes this move. If this happens, it happens at the draft. They may get less for it because he'll have 1 year left as opposed to the two. But I think if you're Nashville, you could live with that. Now that's most of the TSM big board. Again, the trade deadline is Friday. I'll probably do a recap podcast as well. A couple of notes that I want to make. First of all, I mentioned it before, Jarmo Kekalainen out in Columbus. Spent a lot of time there. But I kind of felt like he was on borrowed time, especially after the Mike Babcock stuff. It kind of felt like this was nearing the end of the road. Uh, John Davidson, the president, kind of came out and said, listen, we think we've got good players here. And they do. And Jarmo did a heck of a job there. He brought in some great talent. The Line A deal, the Line A for Dubois deal, Johnny Gaudreau's there, Werenski. They do have talented players. They don't have the goaltending. And I kind of wonder about the coaching situations. Pascal Vincent or Vincent Pascal, is he going to be the long term answer, or is this just he had to take over because what happened with Babcock? Because I think the next GM is going to question what direction they go in. That'll be the next statement address. Columbus Blue Jackets will be the next statement address, so you have that to look forward to. I'm kind of wondering where Columbus goes from here. But they did get some good news. They're going to get an outdoor game next year. They're going to get they're going to get the Stadium Series game. We played at the Horseshoe in Columbus, where the Ohio State football team plays. They'll take on the Detroit Red Wings, and what could be. I love the outdoor games. I do. I think it's great. Columbus is getting their first one, just like I thought it was great last year when Carolina got their first one. And to be honest with you, I think the Stadium Series game next year is more exciting than the Winter Classic. And the Winter Classic next year is going to be at Wrigley Field. It's going to be the Blackhawks and the Blues, a game we just saw at Busch Stadium a couple of years ago. And I got to be honest here. I'm not. I have a couple of issues with this. One is that we just had this game not too long ago, but two, the Chicago Blackhawks keep getting these things. I call them things. Like they got the number one, they win the draft lottery, get the number one overall pick, they get Bedard. Now they get a Winter Classic, and it kind of feels like they were never officially punished for the whole Kyle Beach situation. And you could tell me that, well, it's a different management, you coach, and I still go, but it's the same organization. That's my response. If Ottawa got punished harder for trading a guy to a team that was on the guys no trade list when they traded Evgeny Dodonov. So I feel like Chicago just has gotten away with this. And listen, I listen. You could disagree with it. This is just my opinion, but I just don't think this is the right way. But again, Chicago St. Louis Winter Classic again. There's so many other games though and places we could go see a Winter Classic. Go back to Buffalo from where the first one was. The the Sabres could get an outdoor game. I would love a Battle of Florida outside. I mean, we did California with the Kings of the Ducks and the Kings of the Sharks. Let's go to the Battle of Florida, even if we have to do it at night. Tampa Bay, the Lightning and the Panthers. Let's do it. I'm in there for it. Let's go back to Fenway. Bruins Rangers at Fenway would make so much sense because you got the Red Sox Yankee rivalry we could throw out there. We've done the Battle of Pennsylvania outside. I'm never going to be opposed to that. There's other places, other things we could go see. I thought they nailed it this year with Seattle and Vegas. I thought that was a lot of fun. You know, they got the Stadium Series right. Columbus gets it. I think we're in a good position when it comes to these outdoor games. So, again, just my thought there on the Blackhawks. But that'll do it for the trade deadline preview of the Breakaway Bandits podcast here on the Sports Insanity Network. Follow the network on Twitter at SInsanityReal. Follow the podcast on Twitter at SIM Breakaway. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Pubmaster Rifkin. We're also on Facebook. Check out the website, www.thesportsinsanitynetwork.com for blogs, logs, planes, trains, and automobiles. And until next time, I'm Mike Rifkin signing off here on the Breakaway Bandits podcast on the Sports Insanity Network. Everyone get excited for the trade deadline.